Coming up on this Wednesday edition of Newsline at Noon, South and North Korea will reopen their industrial park at the border town of Kaesong next Monday, ending a 5-month suspension. New employment in the country jumped by more than 400,000 last month, the largest monthly gain in almost a year. But it's not the same story for job seekers in their 20s and 30s. Plus, Russia rejects a French-led UN resolution that refers to consequences should Syria fail to hand over its chemical weapons. President Obama vows to work with Moscow to see Damascus destroy its chemical arms. These stories and more on Newsline at Noon.
Where's the best place for bibimbap?
Les Jeux Olympiques d'hiver se dérouleront-ils à Pyeongchang?
هل أنتم حقاً سابع أكبر مصدر في العالم؟
この歌手は誰ですか？你好，最近哪部电视剧的人气最旺？
Korea is attracting interest from around the world. The more you know, the more you want to know. Dynamic Korea.
Thanks for joining us. You're watching Newsline at Noon. I'm Choi Yusan in Seoul.
Very good to have you with us. I'm Mark Broom. We begin with another step forward in relations between the two Koreas. Seoul and Pyongyang have set a date for resuming operations at their jointly run factory zone in the north after 5 months of suspension.
Our Unification Ministry correspondent Hwang Sung-hee has the details.
South Korean factories at the inter-Korean Gaeseong industrial complex will start running again after a trial run next Monday. The agreement between the two Koreas reached after overnight negotiations that stretched into early Wednesday morning ends the 5-month-long suspension of operations at the joint business park. North Korea unilaterally withdrew all of its workers from the complex in early April amid an escalation in inter-Korean tensions. Under the deal, South Korean businesses with operations at the border town will be exempt from taxes for this year. The two sides agreed to create a dispute arbitration panel for solving future conflicts at the Kaesong complex and to introduce electronic identification devices within this year to ease South Koreans' commute to the complex. The Joint Committee on the Kaesong complex also agreed to make efforts to attract foreign companies to the business park. One of the first steps will be inviting foreign investors in South Korea to the border town next month to explain business opportunities there. The Joint Committee will hold further discussions on issues like allowing the use of mobile phones and the internet in the business park within this year. Another round of subcommittee meetings will be convened on Friday, followed by a third round of talks by the Joint Committee on Monday. The South Korean chief delegate to the Joint Committee said the two Koreas made progress in areas where they have not yet reached an agreement. Hwang Sung-hee, Arirang News.
With the Park Geun-hye administration making all-out efforts to create more jobs, latest data suggests the nation's job market is picking up steam. Last month, the country recorded its largest year-on-year job creation in nearly a year. Our Hwang Ji-hye has the details.
Hopes are growing that labor market conditions in Korea are picking up as the number of new jobs accelerated last month. Statistics Korea said Wednesday that the number of employed people stood at around 25 million in August, up more than 400,000 from the same period a year earlier. On-year job creation for August posted its largest jump in 11 months. The employment rate of those aged between 15 and 64 rose 0.3 percentage points to 64.6% in August, a healthy number but still well under the Park Geun-hye administration's target of 70%. The agency said the rise in the number of salaried workers and the number of self-employed declining at a slower pace helped boost job creation to over 400,000. By age, however, the number of employed people in their 20s dropped by 36,000, with the employment rate of that age bracket falling more than 1 percentage point to 56.6%. The number of employed people in their 30s also dropped by 23,000. It's no surprise then that while the nation's jobless rate held steady at 3% last month from the previous year, the rate for those aged between 25 to 29 rose 1.2 percentage points to nearly 7%. By sector, the Health and Social Welfare Service added the most jobs at over 175,000 in August from a year earlier. The hospitality and dining business also added 96,000 more jobs. The data comes as the nation's economy is showing signs of recovery from its prolonged downturn. The Korean economy grew 1.1% in the second quarter of this year from the previous quarter, rising above 1% for the first time in more than 2 years. Hwang Ji-ae, Arirang News.
It looks like Korea will soon reduce the maximum number of working hours allowed per week in line with the government's efforts to improve workers' quality of life. The Labor Ministry says the plan is part of a proposed revision to the country's labor law that would limit the number of hours a person can work per week to 52 from the current 68. The 52-hour limit would allow people to work 40 hours during the week and put in an additional 12 hours of overtime during the week or on the weekend instead of the current 28 hours. The reduced working hours would also serve to increase the number of part-time jobs in the country. The revision is widely expected to pass Parliament and would be implemented starting in 2016.
Export prices dropped for 2 months in a row in August on a lower won to dollar exchange rate, while import prices rose on higher oil prices. The Bank of Korea said Wednesday that export prices fell by 0.7% in August from the previous month, mostly due to the exchange rate, which fell by 0.9% over the same period. Import prices rose by 0.7%, a turnaround from a drop of 0.8% in the previous month on rising oil and raw material prices. Before wrapping up her state visit to Vietnam, President Park Geun-hye traveled to the country's economic capital, Ho Chi Minh City, on Tuesday, where she urged officials there to offer more support to Korean businesses. Our presidential correspondent, Ju sent us this report.
Hanoi may be the political capital of Vietnam, but Ho Chi Minh City is the economic center. President Bach on Tuesday flew over to the nation's economic capital and held talks with the city's party committee secretary Le Tan Hai and Mayor Le Hong Kwan.
특히 그 경제 분야에 있어서 우리 두 나라 간의 그 협력 증진이 양국 국민들의 삶에 크게 기여하고 있다 이런 생각을 했습니다.
President Bach called for further support for Korean companies operating in Vietnam, asked city officials to ease regulations for employment of foreign workers and construction, and to provide tax incentives for businesses that invest in the country again. Later in the day, President Bach toured the biggest Korean company operating in Ho Chi Minh City called Hanse.
기술력을 높이고 또 생산 라인을 이렇게 글로벌화하고 하면은 얼마든지 경쟁력을 높일 수 있는 그런 또 사례도 같다고 생각을 합니다.
Hanse is an apparel firm that makes products for global fashion brands like Gap, Nike, and Uniqlo through original equipment manufacturer or OEM deals. Senior Presidential Secretary for Economic Affairs Cho Won-dong told reporters that President Bach's trip to the city aimed to address one of Vietnam's most urgent economic issues, the imbalance in its bilateral trade with Korea as imports far exceed exports. Her visit to the company, Cho added, will serve to encourage Korean firms to invest in Vietnam and export products made there to other countries as a way to solve the imbalance in bilateral trade. President Bach also met with leaders of Korean businesses operating in that city, including Lotte Mart, Kaesong, and CJ, and listened to the difficulties they face in doing business in Vietnam. Many observers say President Bach's sales diplomacy, added with her soft diplomacy in Vietnam, led to a number of tangible results in the economic sector. After wrapping up her 5-day stay here in Vietnam, President Bach will be returning to Seoul on Wednesday. Ju, Arirang News, Hanoi.
For your fill of Korean and international news. Join Chae Yu-sun and Mark Broom every weekday at lunchtime. Newsline at Noon.
Plenary session this Wednesday and vote on the government restructuring bills.
Russia's plan to put Syria's chemical weapons under international control has sparked a diplomatic dispute, with some saying it could be a diversionary tactic to avoid military intervention. Our Yurian has the details.
Syria has given its word, saying it's ready to give up its chemical weapons arsenal.
We are ready to declare the location of the chemical weapons, stop production of the chemical weapons, and show these facilities to representatives of Russia and other United Nations member states.
Syria accepted Russia's proposal from Monday, under which it will put all of its chemical weapons under international control and have them destroyed. But most of the international community has its doubts about the proposal, which it suspects is a stalling tactic against U.S.-led military action. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry says the proposal has to be endorsed by the UN Security Council to have the force it ought to have.
This cannot be a process of delay. This cannot be a process of avoidance. That has to be real, has to be measurable, tangible, and it is exceedingly difficult. I want everybody here to know, to fulfill those conditions.
And for this diplomatic option to have a chance of succeeding, the threat of a U.S. military action, the credible, real threat of U.S. military action must continue as we are talking today and will continue to talk.
Britain, France, and the United States are expected to introduce a UN resolution, which includes a detailed timetable for the Syrian regime to hand over its chemical weapons.
Britain and France and America will be tabling a UN Security Council resolution today, because I think what's important is to make sure this isn't some delaying tactic, that this isn't some ruse. If this is a serious proposal, then we should act accordingly. And I think
the measure would also set up international inspections to oversee the dismantling of the weapons and allow for military action if the Assad regime is uncooperative, according to French officials. Russia rejected the resolution and called off a UN Security Council meeting, which it had initially requested. The United States blames Syrian government forces for the chemical weapons attack near Damascus on August 21st, which killed over 1,400 civilians. Yurian, Arirang News.
Staying with Syria, U.S. President Barack Obama has given one of the most important speeches of his presidency, attempting to convince a skeptical nation that military action against Syria is required. He, however, vowed to work with Moscow first to see Damascus give up its chemical weapons. Our Kim Ji-yeon has more.
President Obama made a televised address Tuesday evening local time to explain his decision to respond to Syria's alleged use of chemical weapons with targeted airstrikes. Obama said his administration knows the Bashar al-Assad regime was responsible for the chemical weapons attack and described it as a clear crime against humanity.
When dictators commit atrocities, they depend upon the world to look the other way until those horrifying pictures fade from memory. But these things happened. The facts cannot be denied.
Obama added that a failure to act now would threaten the security of the U.S. and its allies, and added that the question now is what the U.S. and the international community is prepared to do about the violations.
If we fail to act, the Assad regime will see no reason to stop using chemical weapons. As the ban against these weapons erodes, other tyrants will have no reason to think twice about acquiring poison gas and using them.
Obama also explained why the military response would be limited and would not result in a slippery slope into another war in the region. He said that the surgical strikes on Syria would send a clear message to deter the Assad regime from using chemical weapons again.
Let me make something clear. The United States military doesn't do pinpricks. Even a limited strike will send a message to Assad that no other nation can deliver. I don't think we should remove another dictator with force. We learned from Iraq that doing so makes us responsible for all that comes next. But a targeted strike can make Assad or any other dictator think twice before using chemical weapons.
Obama said other diplomatic alternatives have fallen short over the past 2.5 years. He was skeptical about the Russian proposal to push the Assad regime to disclose its stockpiles of chemical weapons. The president said it was too early to tell if the deal was going to succeed, adding that the Assad regime needs to verify that it will keep its commitments. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Iranian President Hassan Rouhani says Tehran is prepared for a win-win game on its nuclear programs, but there's limited time for an international resolution to the nuclear issue. On live television Tuesday, the Iranian president then said the international community must seize the opportunity for diplomacy to resolve the issue. The remarks come ahead of a meeting between the Iranian foreign minister and the EU foreign policy chief in New York later this month, and resuming Tehran's dialogue with the UN Security Council permanent members and Germany on its nuclear ambitions. In a separate speech to clerics, Rouhani, however, said his government will not withdraw an iota of its rights to nuclear development.
The wait is over. Fans of tech firm Apple finally got to see the latest iPhone models that have been split for the first time into a premium product and a more affordable version. Apple says they are cheaper, faster, and a little prettier with a splash of color. Ji Myung-gil has more.
Apple unveiled not one, but 2 new iPhones on Tuesday at an event at Apple's California headquarters. The new flagship 5S and the lower-cost 5C. The pricier 5S comes in 3 colors, gray, silver, and gold, starting with a price tag of $199 with a contract. The cheaper 5C comes in 5 vivid colors, blue, green, pink, yellow, and white, and starts at $99 with a contract. The iPhone 5S will be the first Apple device to feature a faster processor called the A7, a 64-bit chip, which is twice as fast as the chip in the iPhone 5.
What I don't think people realize is the tremendous improvements they've made internally in the iPhone. Both a 64-bit chip, which will allow for much faster processing across all of the apps.
It also includes a chip called M7, a processor that can detect movement, which will enable the iPhone to support smarter health and fitness apps. Apple hopes the cheaper 5C will help it make greater inroads into lucrative developing markets. Apple is trying to beat back rivals like Samsung and China's Huawei in markets like India and China, where it is losing ground. Pre-orders for the iPhone 5C start on Friday, and both versions will be on sale from September 20th. Apple said the newest version of Apple's mobile operating system, iOS 7, will be released to the public next Wednesday. Kim Myung-gil, Arirang News.
German Thomas Bach has been elected as the new president of the International Olympic Committee, securing one of the most influential jobs in the sporting world for the next 8 years. But the incoming president, who is a former Olympic gold medalist, has many challenges ahead of him. Kim Min-ji has the details.
Thomas Bach.
Germany's Thomas Bach on Tuesday was elected as the next president of the International Olympic Committee. The former fencing gold medalist is the first Olympic champion to head the IOC in the body's 119-year history.
It's the first time that an Olympic champion has been elected to be IOC president. And this is what you can expect, that I will put sport in the center of all our attention.
Bach, who is one of the current 4 vice presidents, was a favored candidate for his vast experience in some of the IOC's major functions. In addition to serving on the IOC executive board, he has headed anti-doping investigations and led television rights negotiations. However, the incoming president has a string of serious challenges ahead of him. Bach must first deal with the 2014 Sochi Winter Games, which is plagued by problems including security concerns related to a Russian anti-gay propaganda law, budget concerns, and fears of warm weather. The 2016 Rio Summer Olympics are also falling behind schedule. Besides the Olympic Games, Bach faces other tasks such as fighting doping and match fixing, dealing with financial costs, and rooting out corruption among IOC members. Bach has pledged to reform the structure of the Games and has said he wants to curb the cost of bidding and staging the Games. Bach is the 9th president of the world's most powerful sports body and the 8th European to hold position. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
The Seoul Metropolitan Government has officially launched a new bus service that will be operating in the wee hours from midnight to 5 a.m. every day. While most are in favour of the so-called owl buses, there are those who are not. Connie Lee has more.
It's a little past midnight, and the first night bus of the day is off. This N37 will be making more than a dozen stops before it ends its route at 5 a.m. Branded as the Owl Bus, these night buses shine its owl logo on the front and side to signal their nighttime duty. The city of Seoul is currently running 2 night bus routes in a trial run, but come Friday, 7 more routes will be added to the list, making it 9 routes in total. The trial run of the first 2 routes was a success, with more than 2,000 passengers using the bus each day. It's past 2 a.m. here in Seoul, but as you can see behind me, this night bus is full of passengers.
I'm using the night bus for the first time today after hanging out with friends. I think it's great and convenient. The bus stops near my house and it's also cheaper than taking a taxi.
It costs 1,850 won, or about $1.70, much cheaper than taking a taxi, which has a starting rate of about $2.60 after midnight. In a survey, the government found that 88% of Seoul residents are in favor of having more of these buses, but there are also those who are not so pleased.
For taxi drivers like us that get a lot of business in the late hours, these new buses are really going to affect our business.
Government officials, however, disagree.
The people who use the night buses are different from those who take taxis. Passengers who don't mind the waiting time will take the night buses, but those who want to get to their destinations quickly will take taxis. So we don't think taxi drivers will be that affected.
The wait for each bus could in fact be pretty long, 40 to 45 minutes on average. And as safety is a concern, especially late at night, Owl bus drivers can only drive under the speed limit of 70 kilometers an hour, and they cannot have worked during the day. Connie Lee, Arirang News.
And now let's get an update on the forecast with our weathercaster Lee Ji-hyun standing by. Hello there, Ji-hyun.
Well, good afternoon, guys. Now it's coming. Korea's Fall Harvest Festival Chuseok is next Thursday, and about 35 million people are expected to travel back to their hometowns for the holiday.
35 million people, that's really a staggering amount of people out on the roads, making huge traffic jams, of course. And the population of Korea is only about 49 million.
Right. I think the number is higher this year, especially because many people will be able to enjoy a 5-day weekend starting on the 18th.
Right, I love it. And according to a recent survey, 84% of people are planning to drive home this Chuseok, so serious traffic congestion is expected on major highways, as Mark said. But thankfully, it's not going to rain during the Chuseok holiday. It would be really unpleasant to travel on clogged roads on a rainy day like today. Well, it's been raining since last night, but it's thinning out and should clear out by mid-afternoon. But even after the rain goes away, the sun will stay behind the clouds, so it's gonna be another cloudy, cool and windy day today. Now tomorrow we'll start out with overcast skies, but afternoon highs will be 2 to 3 degrees higher than today. But the rain will return to Seoul and the surrounding areas later in the evening and might linger till Saturday. So it looks like we should keep our umbrellas handy for the rest of the week. Well, it feels quite chilly outside, so don't dress up like me. And with that, let's take a look at today's number. Now the capital is expected to rise to 24 degrees Celsius, that's 75 degrees in Fahrenheit, and the afternoon highs in Daegu and Busan will get up into 27. Now let's see how other regions are looking. It looks like temperature in Jeju will make it to 28 with a good good amount of sunshine, no rain showers for Jeju today. While Dokdo and Mount Kumgang will be under lots of clouds, but there's a much cooler afternoon is on tap for Mount Kumgang. Well, that's all I have for you today. Hope you enjoy the rest of the day. And back to Mark and Yusan in the studio.
Well, thank you ever so much, as always, Jian, for your wonderful weather report there. And those are the stories we are following at this hour.
And we'll be back tomorrow for up-to-the-minute news coverage right here on Newsline at Noon.